Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. For those of you who follow my channel, you know that I always talk about history. And I say that those of us who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. And I talk a lot about individual liberty and gun rights. And the reason for that is I know that all forms of collectivism throughout history, whether that be communism, fascism, socialism, lead to the mass imprisonment of those who have non-government sanctioned ideas and the mass slaughter and death by the millions of innocent people who dare stand up against the ruling class. Well, there's another aspect of the world that we can use to help understand what's happening in the present day and help build a better future. You see, in America, we are unique in that we have the Constitution, and this guarantees us certain rights, freedom of speech, the right to protect ourselves, the right to bear arms, and so forth. Now, these things aren't always properly implemented, but they serve as a guideline and make it very difficult for the government to take our rights. And because of that, things tend to happen in Europe and Africa 10, 15, 20, 30 years before they're able to be implemented in the United States of America. Because for certain things to happen in America, it takes a long period of propaganda to change the public mind, to give the government authority to take away certain rights that we may have. And if you think about government today, and the reason why it happens in Europe and then it happens in America, governments aren't within national borders anymore, right? The politicians are bought off by oligarchs at the top, big corporations, big tax-exempt foundations, big hedge funds, financial institutions buy off the politicians, and the interest of these big institutions, this oligarchical class, is international. They don't really care about national borders, and that's why we see government constantly going global. And this is why I always say we have a global corporate government. And if you look at the world that way, you can see why the same thing seems to happen all over the globe. But again, it takes a little bit longer to happen in America because we have the Constitution. Well, lately I've talked about what's been going on in South Africa. I actually spoke about the South African farm murders and the confiscation of white-owned farmland before the South African Parliament passed a bill to confiscate all white-owned land without compensation and redistribute it to, allegedly, the people. And I use that as an example to show people that we need to reject identity politics. We need to reject collectivism because it's always sold as having altruistic intentions, and what always happens is the centralization of power to the government, and the government uses that power to abuse the people. Lately I spoke about gun rights, or recently I did a report called The Truth About Gun Control, which I strongly recommend you watch. And in that report I go over different forms of gun control all over the world, and I use Switzerland as proof that America does not have a gun problem. America has a cultural and a mental health problem because Switzerland has the highest gun ownership rate in the world. You could own semi-automatic rifles, and there's only been 120 gun-related homicides in Switzerland over the last decade, and there hasn't been a mass shooting in Switzerland since 2001. So if they could own all those guns, if they could have these deadly weapons and not have these shootings, but we do in America, then in America we have a cultural and a mental health problem. Another country I spoke about was the United Kingdom. They have some of the toughest gun laws in the world. And although their gun-related homicide deaths are nearly non-existent, there has been a mass spike in knife crimes and robberies and domestic robberies, break-ins, that sort of thing, because criminals know that good people don't have guns to protect themselves. I also stated in that report, The Truth About Gun Control, that the biggest problem the people of Britain have is not an increase in robberies and rapes and all of those sort of crimes, right, because gun rights are women's rights. that the people of Britain do not have weapons to protect themselves if their government becomes authoritarian, which historically it's inevitable that governments become more and more corrupt, more and more authoritarian. Well, let's look at what has happened in the United Kingdom over the last 3 days. 3 days ago, Brittany Pettibone, an American YouTuber, a conservative Christian, and Martin Sellner were detained when entering the UK and held and questioned for 3 days prior to being deported. Brittany Pettibone was on her way to interview Tommy Robinson. We'll get back to Tommy in a second. Martin Sellner was on his way to give an interview about free speech, as well as, give a speech regarding free speech, how ironic is that, as well as assist in the interview of Tommy Robinson. Now, Sellner had previously attempted to give talks on free speech in the UK, and both times had those talks canceled because violence from Antifa, the communist group which has sprung up all over the globe. Fast forward to the present day. Brittany Pettibone was on her way to interview Tommy Robinson, and she was detained. Simultaneously, pretty much at the same time, Tommy Robinson was walking through the streets of Britain in a very public, crowded area, and he and his camerawoman were approached by 6 or 7 grown men with their faces covered, wearing Antifa gear, who proceeded to attack Tommy Robinson and his female photographer. They took the camera from the female photographer, they beat her down, kicked her in the face, and they beat up Tommy Robinson, and luckily there were enough people around where the situation didn't become deadly. Now, Brittany Pettibone was detained because she said, the official reason that the UK gave, that she was going to interview Tommy Robinson, and Britain has labeled Tommy Robinson a far-right extremist who spreads racial hatred. So she was denied entrance into the country. Martin Sellner had his free speech talks shut down by Antifa. And then Tommy Robinson was beat down by Antifa right in the streets of UK, broad daylight with everyone to see on camera. But the government of Britain said that they weren't going to arrest the people that beat up Tommy Robinson because they had face masks on and they just couldn't quite figure out who they are. Now, of course, we know this is a lie because with facial recognition, I mean, you could see the top half of these people's face. I guarantee you, if you put their picture on Facebook, Facebook could probably tell you who they are with their facial recognition technology. So the government of the UK is labeling Catholics, conservatives, far-right extremists. They're allowing Antifa to shut down free speech events, not letting people into the country who talk about free speech, and not investigating Antifa when they violently assault people who are simply walking on the streets of the UK, people who are generally right-wing in ideology. So the government doesn't want to investigate Antifa. So I think with these events put together, the arrest of Brittany, the arrest of Martin at the border and their deportation, and the beatdown of Tommy Robinson, something we've seen very often with Antifa violence, we have to ask the question, is Antifa the terrorist arm of Britain's government? And as we have spoken about, or as we talked about earlier, the government today is corporate and it's global and it's pushed down from the top. So let's parallel that question. Is Antifa the terrorist arm of the British government with what has been happening in the United States of America? Do you remember the events of Charlottesville? KKK white supremacists came to the same event as Antifa communists, and there was violence all day, and both of these groups should be condemned, right? I would always condemn the KKK. They're bad. I condemn Nazis. They're bad. Because there are actual KKK members, actual Nazi members, and some of them were in Charlottesville. At least it's alleged, although the guy that put the whole event together was actually had actually voted for Obama and was a big Occupy Wall Street guy, so we don't know if he was actually placed. But even if he was, there are some KKK people, Nazis, actual Nazis, not just anyone far right of a communist, who are out there. So these people met up with Antifa communists. There was violence the entire day, fists being thrown the entire day, and at one point, one of the right-wing KKK people ran over a member of the Antifa side, and someone died. And obviously, the entire day was reprehensible and a stain on the United States of America. So President Trump comes out later that day, and he says, we need to condemn the violence on all sides of what occurred. We need to condemn right-wing KKK Nazi people. We need to condemn left-wing communists of Antifa. And the mainstream media came out, and they killed President Trump. How could he say that? How can he condemn the anti-fascists when white supremacy is on the rise in America? The media completely protected Antifa. And this was very troubling to those of us who pay attention, because for those of us who pay attention, we had seen the incredible violence and intimidation campaign waged by Antifa over the course of the last year in the United States of America. I mean, anyone who tried to speak at Berkeley, whether Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro, whoever it may be, would be met with Antifa. They would be attacked with weapons. The police would always stand down and not protect people from violent Antifa, as to send a message to free thinkers that if you try to have these type of ideas, the police, the government of the United States of America, the communist government in California, will allow Antifa to violently attack you. And this has happened all over the country for about a year prior to Charlottesville. So it was very, I guess you could say, shocking to see the mainstream media cover up the violence of Antifa. And to put this into perspective, what if this were KKK members? I mean, can you imagine if 6 people dressed in KKK in London on video camera attacked a Muslim and just beat the crap out of him in broad daylight? This would be international outrage, as it should be. The mainstream media would have this on the lead of every mainstream outlet in America for the next week, the next month, the next year. It's all they would talk about. But instead, they investigate what they allege to be a wide range of hate crimes, which is really, although some of them do happen, a lot of them are just people like Brittany Pettibone, Martin Sellner, Tommy Robinson pointing out that the West is being purposely flooded by the government in a migration replacement plan, which I've done a report on. The UN said 20 years ago they were going to replace the populations of the West with Islam, with Muslims. They're just pointing out that this is happening, but the government doesn't want it pointed out, so they say anyone who speaks about this, this is a hate crime. And of course, this is easier to implement in Europe because they don't have quite the freedom of speech that we have in the United States of America. So you see what's happening here, and this seems to be a global problem because the same thing has happened in Germany, France, Sweden. Antifa is used as a terrorist organization to silence people who criticize governments in these countries, these left-wing governments. Anyone who puts out conservative or even just libertarian or classical liberal ideas are violently attacked by Antifa. So we have to ask, is Antifa the terrorist network of the corporate global government? And that includes the mainstream media who has covered up their violence. We already know that Antifa has received funding from George Soros, who, of course, billionaire George Soros put $18 billion toward philanthropy, give me a break, this year to combat Donald Trump. We know that George Soros is a globalist player who attempts to destabilize countries. He's one of the faces of the corporate global government, and he's been caught funding Antifa. So we have to ask, is Antifa the terrorist network of the global corporate government? Is it being used by the mainstream media in the UK, in the West, in the United States of America to silence political oppositions to those of the ruling class? And we see what happens overseas, what happens in Europe, what happens in South Africa, happens there before it happens in America because we have constitutional rights. Now fast forward to this morning. I wake up and find out that Lauren Southern has been detained trying to enter Britain, and she will be deported because she's a Catholic conservative who has spoken about the West being flooded with Muslims, being flooded with Islam in a migration population replacement plan by the United Nations. If you don't follow Lauren Southern, she was the one that first brought my attention to the South African farm murders. She generally speaks of ideas of liberty. She pushes freedom of speech, freedom of religion in spite of what they'll say. She's not saying that people shouldn't be able to practice religion. She's saying that our culture shouldn't be purposely replaced by the government without the people of the West being fully made aware of what's happening. Because once Western civilization's culture goes, she understands that they'll use voting, and this is why they're flooding us with people from the third world, to end freedom of speech, which of course is the goal of the ruling class, to end gun rights, which we've seen after Parkland is of course the goal of the ruling class, to end privacy rights, to end a right to a fair trial, which they've tried to spin. Me Too started as a good thing, and now they're trying to say all women need to be believed, men should be fired, they should be arrested, they should be imprisoned without a fair trial, because they're trying to erode they want people to get it in their mind that we shouldn't have fair trials. This is all an erosion of liberty, and it's very cleverly being done from the top down. So we see what happens in the UK happens, and what happens in Europe happens in America next. So at this point, if Lauren Southern and Brittany Pettibone are being denied entry into the United Kingdom, we have to assume that Tom Anderson, myself, I would not be permitted entry into the United Kingdom based on the views that I regularly talk about on the internet. Think about how terrifying that is. Think of how much freedom of speech and our liberty is under attack. Think about how important these events are. We need to put them together, connect the dots, and we need to stand up before it's too late. Freedom is under attack worldwide. It is time to stand up for Brittany Pettibone. It is time to stand up for Lauren Southern. It is time to stand up for Martin Sellner. It is time to stand up for Tommy Robinson. It is time to stand up for the farmers in South Africa. It is time to stand up for our gun rights worldwide. Because look at what's happening in the UK, right? In my report, The Truth About Gun Control, I said, what happens to the British people if the government of England becomes authoritarian? Well, what are we seeing in Britain right now? They're becoming authoritarian. Britain is an occupied nation, and the people of Britain have no guns. They can't protect themselves. Tommy Robinson can't protect himself when Antifa, who I would argue is the terrorist organization of the corporate global government, of the mainstream media, of the British government, attacks Tommy Robinson in the street. He can't protect himself, and the people certainly can't rise up and protect themselves against what has become the authoritarian government of the UK. Because they don't have gun rights. But our rights are also under attack here in the United States and America. And how long do we have to wait until we wake up and find out that my ideas, the ideas of Tom Anderson, are not permittable in the United States of America? This is the last refuge for freedom, and we need to stand up for it. Because what's going to happen to me? And if I fall, what's going to happen to you? It's time to draw a line in the sand. I mean, look at what they're doing right now with YouTube, right? They're trying to ban people like me under the guise of hate speech. I did a report, 2 reports the other day, one titled YouTube Censorship, the Weaponization of Hate Speech, and the other titled The Philosophy of Hate Speech. I strongly recommend you watch them. But hate speech, or what's alleged to be hate speech, is being weaponized as an attack on the First Amendment in the United States of America. Our basic freedoms are under attack. Look at what's happening in Britain. Look at what's happening in South Africa. Look at what's happening in Sweden and Germany. If we don't stand up now, in 10 years, maybe sooner, but 15 years, 20 years, everything we hold dear in America is going to be taken away under the name of protecting people from hate, under the guise of an egalitarian collectivism for the greater good, which will only end in the mass imprisonment, silencing, slaughtering, and death of people in the United States of America. It's time to draw the line in the sand. Will you stand up for liberty while you still have it, or will you remain distracted and wake up one day in a country you can't believe you live in? Thank you so much, guys. I'm Tom Anderson. Please help share this link. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on YouTube, so please follow my other social media so you can find me in case I get shut down. If you want to get on my email list, just type your email in the comments below. I'd really appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter, TomFFRnews, Tom Anderson on Facebook, FFRnews on Facebook, Tom Anderson on Steemit, Tom Anderson on Gab. And if you want to support me financially, which I really hope you do, someone also brought up that I should start an Exodus wallet, so I plan on doing that. It's a good idea, so I plan on doing that over the next week. My time is very hard, and figuring out how to do something like that, I'm going to need a block of probably a few hours. So if you want to support me financially, go to www.patreon.com/FFRnews. Even $1 a month makes a big difference for me. Please help empower me. Please help me fight for liberty, because I see what's happening. I understand history. I see what's happening in Europe. And if we don't fight for it now, it's going to be so much harder to fight for it later. And with the advancements in artificial technology, with the advancements and the further push in the spy state, we're going to get to a breaking point where once freedom goes, we're not going to be able to get it back. So please support me. Even if you don't agree with everything I say, the general premise that we need to fight against collectivism, we need to fight for individual liberty, we need to protect the Constitution. My God, over my dead body will I. Thank you, guys.